At Cool Air Products, we developed AC Smart Seal Quick Shot with professionals in mind. It's the only product on the market that's 3-in-1, with sealant, lubricant, and UV dye all in a single application. It's non-toxic, non-flammable, 100% safe to the touch, eco-friendly, and compatible with all refrigerants. It's a safe solution option, backed by years of R&D, Intertech tested, and has sealed millions of leaks. AC Smart Seal, the professional's choice.
What's up, guys? Awesome podcast for you guys. Doug Donovan's on the podcast. Now, Doug Donovan, he's the CEO of Interplay Learning. If you don't know what Interplay Learning is just yet, well, you will after this podcast, because it's a pretty cool platform that they've been building for the last 10 years. Basically, it's a skilled trades training online, on-demand platform. They have virtual reality. They have point of view simulation that's web-based. So you can go in as an individual, or you can go in as a company to train your technicians. Very, very cool stuff. Now, I learned about this a little while ago, and I'm going to explain to Doug that his brother Brian reached out to me about 3-4 months ago, and we had talked about technology and stuff, and he introduced me to how their platform works and how they're using it to train technicians. Now, I thought it was super cool because right away, I mean, it's hard to throw a technician out in the field. Hey, go do this, go do that, go do this. So if you can put them inside a comfortable area, like a training center, boardroom, or something like that, and give them simulation training before they actually go out into the field, it's going to help a little bit, I think. One of the other cool things we're going to talk about closer to the end of the podcast is how Interplay Learning has helped manufacturers create training programs for their own equipment. So we're going to talk about Carrier specifically, because Carrier was brought up sort of first by Doug, and one of the heat pumps that Carrier has, how they've developed training, and it's done through Carrier, but Interplay Learning has developed that virtual training for that piece of equipment. I think this is super cool. Before you go out, if you've never seen it before, if you can get your hands on this training, to spend 30-40 minutes doing virtual training on this specific unit before you actually go out into the field and work on it, I think would be super valuable for any technician to have. So anyway, guys, let's get into this with Doug. Great conversation, great guy. This is the HVAC Know-It-All podcast. I'm your host, Gary McCreadie.
Welcome to the HVAC Know-It-All podcast. Recorded from a basement somewhere in Toronto, Canada. Your host and HVAC tech, Gary McCreadie, will take you on a deep dive into the industry, discussing all things HVAC. From storytelling to technical discussion. Enjoy the show.
Doug, how are you tonight?
Pretty good. Thanks, Gary. Pretty good. Happy to be here.
I'm happy you're here too, because you have a very cool platform for learning. And I mean, I've seen bits and pieces of it on social media. I know that my good friend Mike Mayberry, HVAC reefer guy, as he goes on Instagram, has made a few posts about your platform and your product, but I didn't really look into it further until your brother actually messaged me on LinkedIn one day, because he had read an article I had written for RSES. It was called The Last Word. I think that's the name of the column. And I just wrote it about how technology is advancing and the older generation should not look down upon the younger generation because they want to explore it. And they should not, I guess, look down upon them. They should try to help them out and try to nurture that instead of I don't want any part of that type thing. So I wrote an article kind of loosely based around that, and he reached out to me and he's like, I liked your article, and I think that you'd like what we're doing over here at Interplay Learning. And we talked for a while, and I went online and I seen some of the stuff, and I think it's phenomenal. So I think we need to get into the conversation about how. I think we should first maybe set this up. How did it all begin? Like, it's been in the works for quite a while, right?
It has.
How did the idea start?
Years ago, I was with another company and we were doing training for energy auditors. A group you're familiar with, right? These are the folks who care about, building performance auditors, basically. And we were training them on combustion safety. And I wasn't the subject matter expert. We had a subject matter expert in there. But in the program, long story short, we could only really afford one day in the field. And it made no sense to me that somebody could do one day in the field and then get certified in the field, skill. And
Hmm.
so, and it made sense. I mean, it made sense, right? You couldn't charge $6,000 for this course, and it's kind of a niche trade. And you wanted to train people up quickly and at least get them job ready, if you will. But it became clear that they needed to get into 75 houses with different furnaces and different installations and different, window types and all those things that affect the combustion safety or affect, in this case, building performance. And so we quickly figured out, you could use simulation like they did and do in the military, medical, and aviation, and put a user or a learner into 75 different houses effectively, right? Change the furnace type, change the appliances, change the depressurization, all those things that matter in doing that job well. You could simulate that and get people to practice, right? It's not in the field, but really approaches that and gives them a chance to practice. And does that make sense?
It does. It does. And when you were saying simulate, I thought of like watching a documentary on an astronaut going into like a shuttle simulator. That's
No,
what I
that's right.
envisioned in my head.
That's right. That's it. I mean, that's a good place to start. And people often know flight simulators, right? They've probably seen
Hmm.
some. And certainly we don't require that kind of hardware, but that's the concept. Why they use those is to give someone field-like experience, and they simulate that. And then when you're in that simulator, you can change variables, right? Like that
Hmm.
astronaut you talked about. Like let's have engine 4 blow out or something, and let's see how the astronaut reacts. And let's train that astronaut on doing X, Y, or Z in that situation. And you can only do that through simulation, especially in environments like that, right? You name astronauts, I'm talking about, military, medical, aviation. Those are lives are at stake, high consequence. You can't do a whole lot of live practicing in many of those instances. So
That's right.
simulation
That's right.
takes the place of that. Now, in our case, we certainly don't build those Department of Defense, $6 million simulators. What we do is we use effectively online gaming tools to
Hmm.
deliver what looks like a point of view simulation. So instead of killing the bad guy in a video game, you're using your multimeter and checking the transformer or the like. So that was the genesis of it, and that's really the guts of what we do. That's made a big difference.
Yeah, and I remember watching one of the simulations, and it was I remember like there's almost they're adding like characteristics into like a basement. There's like stairs and stuff like that, and then the furnace is there, and it was like step by step, and it was pretty cool. So I know that there's different platforms within the platform. Like you can put on a VR headset, right, and do this, but you can also go on your phone and do the same thing, or maybe not the
Yeah.
same thing, but
Yep.
you can do some training stuff on your phone.
That's right.
Do you want to maybe break each sort of segment down of this for us?
Yeah, I'll do it in a slightly different way. So this is
Okay.
a big catalog of learning. So let's just start there. So if you go online and you log into our system, all of a sudden there's hundreds of hours of learning, many of those are in these simulations that we've talked about. But there's also video-based learning, right? We recognize you can't learn everything in a field-like environment. You got to learn the fundamentals of, whatever it is, the refrigeration cycle, et cetera. So there's this whole series. I think the HVAC catalog has 46 total courses. We also have plumbing and electrical, multifamily maintenance, and other catalogs. But HVAC is by far our deepest. And so when you log in as Gary, and it'll give you, you can take a pre-assessment and it'll lay out a personalized learning path for you, and off you go. You start, working your way through your learning. And the simulations, when you get to the sims, you can do them. Yeah, you can most people do them on, frankly, most people do them on iPads or Android devices or on their desktop at home. You can do them on mobile devices, although frankly, the simulations are not great on really small screens because it's hard to control your tools, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, technically they work, but we don't advise people to use it. So they just use
Mhm.
the videos, but people consume a ton of videos on the phones too. So we're all, all those devices are sort of primary delivery. Now, for those people who happen to have, or a little more tech forward and have virtual reality goggles, it's a whole different level because you put on the VR headset and you've got your controllers in your hand, and we fundamentally trick your brain. Like you think you're on that rooftop unit working on that 12.5 ton unit. Like you don't know otherwise. You've got your tools, you've got the environment. It's really a compelling experience. And you can imagine how powerful that is for learning because effectively you're creating a space and it's as if we're in the field training. So but you could log in one day and use your VR goggles, then you could be traveling the next and be on your iPad, and you're still going to log in just like any cloud service, and you're going to access Gary's account and you're going to continue on with whatever courses you want to continue on with. Does that make sense? So we're sort of device agnostic. We don't care how you're consuming it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense. And I actually thought of, I had a comical vision in my head there when you're maybe like an apprentice with the VR headset on. I'm like, can we like get a fan in here, blow it on him, and like start spraying him with water so he gets the feeling that
That's
like,
right.
he's in the rain and the wind and stuff outside.
Well, it's real. I mean, so this is just the beginning, right? Like
Yeah.
it's kind of a joy in my life right now to show, and it's kind of been sidelined, frankly, for 6 months for COVID because, with the coronavirus, the headsets they're not that readily available. And it's still a communal event, right? There's maybe a training center with a VR headset, but people don't have them in their homes very often. So because of that, people haven't been using the VR delivery. They've been just using the online, which you can imagine with COVID, we're also like incredibly busy and the usage is way up because people have either downtime or trapped in a place. And so they're trying to make that time productive. But the VR, the joy of showing someone VR right now it's just unbelievable because I put it on your head, particularly when it's a domain, right? I could put it on your head and I could put you in, a dinosaur land and you think, oh, that's cool. It's sort of like being around dinosaurs. But I put that on you, a professional in this trade, and you see your manifold or you see your multimeter and you're changing it to measure capacitance and you're on your knee underneath a unit or whatever it is. And then you take it off at the end of whatever scenario you did, and you look at me and depending on your level of profanity, you say like, holy cow, because it really is that compelling an experience.
Cow wouldn't be my first word,
Yeah,
but
well,
that works.
I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
So I have done VR is cool, and I totally agree. I've done a couple of VR things. The last one I did was at a birthday party. It's this big, huge. I think it's called Palladium. Just in the town I used to live, it was a birthday party for one of my kids' cousins or our niece, and there's a VR thing, and I did it with my son, and we were just shooting these enemies like in this like country, like in Western setting, with like saloons and stuff, and these
Yeah.
aliens were coming down, and we were shooting them. And I've done one that pertains to HVAC about 2.5 years ago at the CMPX show in Toronto. Copeland or Emerson had a VR headset where you could actually go into a room and tear down a compressor,
Yeah.
and I thought that was super cool. So I have had experience with VR, and it is super cool, and it actually feels like you're there working on the equipment. Like when I took the headset off, I'm like, oh my god, that was virtually cool.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so
Yeah.
here's the learning science behind it, and the nice part, we didn't invent this, right? We talked about those big industries, and you can imagine the military and medical industries. They study the heck out of it, right? And we work with this cognitive scientist here. I'm in Austin, Texas, and so she's educated me a lot on how the brain works and memory and recall and stuff. And so, a couple fundamental things that the VR offers, and number one is I like to use this demonstration. I know you're working from, I don't know what room in your house, but let's say, what's the color of the rug in your living room, assuming you're not there?
Our family room or living room doesn't have a rug right now
Okay.
because the dog destroyed it, and we
Yes.
had to get rid of it.
The dog ate my homework answer. All right.
Yeah,
Well, what you did to figure that out was you actually created that family room in your space in your head.
that's right.
And then
I did do that.
then you look down, right? Then you look down. So
Yep.
you actually use space as your tool to pull that information out. And we do that all the time. A lot of times you hear over and over, there's nothing that beats experience, there's nothing that beats hands-on training, and I fully agree. Sometimes what's not appreciated there is the main reason why that's the case is you have a space that you can now sort of lock those memories in and go back to and pull very easily. And we use space often as our first tool. And I love like Sherlock Holmes stuff, and they always talk about his memory castle, and he always talks about how, obviously he's fictional, but based on brain science, on like how he uses space for memory. So VR allows you to create that space. Second, you talked about when you're in that Emerson VR environment, and when you took it off, there's a reaction because basically in that time you were there, you had occluded the world. You were in whatever world that VR environment put you in, and your brain didn't know how to be in two places, and so you might as well have been there. And that's why there's that little shock moment when you took it off, you're like, oh, I'm in a conference or something like that. And so that occlusion of the world allows you to have presence like close to 100% on what you're doing. So think about learning, right? If you're learning and you're 100% focused and present in that, you're just much more, your recall and retention is going to be considerably better. And so VR forces that. And then the last thing is you moved your body, right? You said you disassembled something, so you probably had to reach and pull and get down and, do different things with your body. And the moment your body's engaged, your brain works harder. And so you add all those things up, you end up with this incredibly powerful learning tool. And I mean, we're spending a lot of time on VR, and not to overlook the online stuff, which is certainly good. But yeah, the VR is special, right? The VR is, anybody who's tried in the last couple of years, they thought, a little friction here and there in terms of like the equipment's still a little clunky, and there's no question it's still like in its first inning, maybe pushing towards its second inning, but it's got a long way to go. But holy cow, even now, it's just really powerful.
All right, so when it comes to the innovation of pumps, vacuum pumps, when it comes to the innovation of recovery machines, Navac is on top of its game. You've seen me use the battery-powered vacuum pumps. A lot of you guys have went out and bought your own and tried them and finding they work and they work well. All right, 12 CFM vacuum pump. We have the NRDD recovery machine. The thing is fast, it's rugged, it's innovative, it's got a cool screen on it. It shuts off on low pressure when you're finished your recovery machine. It's got the tie-in for the recovery tank for the float. So if it ever becomes, if the float in that thing gets too high, like it's over 80% water capacity, it's going to shut your recovery machine down so you don't overfill that tank. So Navac is on top of their game. So check out their pumps and their recovery machines. Testo has some webinars coming out. They got 4 webinars. Okay, combustion analysis, one with smart probes. They got one with indoor air quality. They have one on saturation, superheat, and subcooling. I'm going to post the links to those webinars in the podcast notes so you guys can go check them out at your convenience. Sign up. I mean, combustion analysis, that's I'm all about that this time of year. Maybe you guys aren't. Maybe you guys are in a warmer climate and you don't do heating, but there's other webinars for you to check out. Indoor air quality would be a great one for you guys. Refrigeration technologies. What can I say? They had to buy a second Nylog filling machine because the orders were just flying off the shelves. Like the product is off the handle because that's how good it is, because it helps in the field, in field situations with a lot of different things. Flares, putting caps back on your TX valves, hot gas bypass valves, on your Schrader cores. It gives you that insurance, and it's made from oil. So you don't need to worry about contamination to a system. It's just oil at a different viscosity than if it was in a compressor type thing. You know what I mean? So check out Nylog if you guys haven't yet. It's a badass product. Yellow Jacket has a new scale. It doesn't have a display on it, which kind of throws a lot of people off. It is displayed on your phone in the YJack View app. I've used it. I like it because it connects right away. If the scale timer for the battery shuts your scale down and you lose connection, you turn the scale back on and you turn the app back on and it connects back up and your information is still there, because it happened to me on an actual job. And I'm like, oh man, did I lose my info? But it was still there when I powered it back up, which is 100% fabulous. So check out that scale, guys. And remember, save 8% on your purchases at TrueTech Tools using promo code KNOWITALL, except for Fluke and FLIR products. Let's get back to Doug, guys, and Interplay Learning. I totally agree with you. Just from my 2 experiences with a VR headset on, I really enjoyed it and I thought it was a cool experience. So what about the non-VR stuff? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so we've got the point of view simulations again, which is what we did for years and years, right? We did technical training using simulations without VR we've only started in VR in the last 2 years. Maybe 2.5. Prior to that, for 4 or 5 years prior to that, we just did the online simulations, which are also incredibly powerful in that, like, for example, say you're troubleshooting a heat pump. We have a heat pump simulation. It has something like 38 faults. So imagine getting that repetition where you're going in and there's different modes in online learning. It's called scaffolding, and you might be in a training mode or a challenge mode where we mix up the faults on you, or even assessment mode where we almost give you no aids and you're just in there with your tools. And so you can imagine you can condense learning time, because you can basically do those field-like experiences that even if you had a training lab, it's hard to create that kind of world. How do you have an undercharged system and then 3 minutes later have an overcharged system and then go do this and break the compressor? And then, you can imagine like doing that in a virtual setting, or in this case, as a virtual environment, just allows us to give you a lot of repetitions and really help your system understanding.
Mm-hmm. So is that point of view simulation, is that interactive as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you control everything. Yeah, if you're on your tablet, you're using your finger to like, okay, I'm going to choose my multimeter, and I'm going to drop the lead left side of the transformer to see what the supply side power is, or, and there's procedure guides depending on what mode you're on. There's also these really fascinating, like we can put a live wire diagram up on the screen while you're there. So imagine that as you're trying to connect that, especially when you're a younger tech, you're trying to connect that 3D piece of machinery with that, that wire diagram. And so we have younger techs who will just drop probes from their multimeter and watch it on the wire diagram to be like, okay, that's where that's where the transformer is, or that's where the safety valve is, or whatever it is on there. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I mean, if you haven't seen the 2D stuff, you'll also be impressed.
Yeah, from what I have seen, it all looks very, very cool. It looks like you guys have done a lot of work and a lot of research to get these all these troubleshooting faults and stuff in place. Sorry. So like, what sort of training courses are available just for the guys that are interested and the girls that are interested to look at your platform? Like, what can they expect to see, learn, or get into when they're inside here?
I mean, you name it. So sort of think of it as like at some level, an online trade school, right? You're going to get everything from the basic, HVAC safety, to system parts, to temperature, pressure, and heat, to, charging, a leak check, evacuation, right down the line, evaporators, condensers, metering devices, right? Like intro to chillers. Look at, we have ductless stuff. We have, ducted stuff. We have split residential AC. I mean, all we've been doing for the last 2 years is building online training content, primarily for the HVAC industry. So there's hundreds of hours here. So we get people who know nothing and use us to really start and ramp into a career. And then we get, those techs who've been on the job for a year to 5, who have plenty of gaps they need to fill in, and so they're on
Mhm.
there. We even have some seasoned techs, the ones who are humble enough to say, I don't know everything. and they'll get in there, and particularly the sims are exciting for them because they'll get to see faults maybe they haven't seen in a while, right? Like I had a senior guy go, God, it was great. I saw a misaligned thermistor, right? Like I haven't seen that in a long time in the field. So there's some things like that too. But I would say we have more usage in that 6-7 year tech or less experienced tech or less, just because of where the content is, as you can imagine. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's deep, and all the videos are everything's 6 minutes or less. That's kind of our rule, right? Because we know people's time, we know how people think today. It really was built for a younger generation. So it's dynamic. The video stuff's on dynamic and active, and there's voice over PowerPoint, then there's quizzes, and yeah, I mean it's an online learning platform really to build technical skills. So I hope that gives you some little vision of what that looks like.
Yeah, no, that seems pretty in depth to me, and I'm sort of glad that you're meeting humble seasoned techs because I don't come across too many of those.
That's right.
So
I can
it
I can introduce you to him.
oh,
Uh,
to him? Oh, okay.
yeah,
All right.
right. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
shoot
other
me
piece of
your
it,
email address.
that's right. The other piece of it, and we don't want this to be too salesy a call, but the other piece, the success we're having is with the companies buy access. They'll buy 10 seats on it because whoever that service manager is or whoever's in charge of training, they have full visibility, right? They can assign, Bobby needs to work more on electrical, or Sally needs skills in this, and they can assign the courses. They'll see, who's done them, when they're complete, have they completed them to the level that shows that they passed the course. All of that really sets up for a foundational learning program. And in the U.S., as you know, and I don't think it's as bad as Canada, but the U.S., the skills gap is pretty dire. And so people have to build their own workforce, right? You're not going to find a skilled tech. You have to make them. And so we got a lot of companies who have invested in this and said, look, this gives us a huge head start on a foundational training program.
Yeah, we're the same. It's really hard. It's really hard to find a skilled tech, because they're really. I think owners of companies are starting to realize, hey, if I got a skilled guy, I better keep that guy or girl. I keep saying guy, but I know that I'm an advocate of women in the trades, but I always say guy just because it's my experience of working with men all the time. But if you have an experienced tech, company owners are like, hey, I gotta keep this tech here.
That's right.
So they're not readily available. And then you have the younger guys coming in that don't have the experience yet. And I totally agree. If I was to start my own company today, I would want to build it with young techs that want to learn and want to sort of advance and are willing to open up,
That's
and
right.
I would love to build techs from the ground up, because then when they get to a certain point, you're going to trust them because you've taught them right, you've put them through the ringer, and maybe not in a bad way, but put them through the ringer to educate them properly on how to interact with customers, how to interact with machinery, how to go and search out information. I mean, there's a skill level to all of this. So I
That's
totally
right.
agree. Building a tech from the ground up is a project I would love to tackle. I mean,
And we want to take the easy stuff off. Like, like to do that, I mean, hands-on's critical.
yeah,
Showing how to interact with the customer critical, all those things. And so what we're trying to do is give you a foundation around the technical side, and we're digital first, right? So you talk about building young techs, you better be digital first, right? Where do they do anything? Like ask them for a restaurant recommendation, ask them for directions. Everyone goes to their phone first to try to pull information. That's how their brain works now to go get. And so to be able to point them to say, oh, and this is, this is Gary's heating and air learning platform, and they see it's all digital and they can get on their phone or on their tablet. It's relevant to them and it attracts them to you. They say, all right, I want to work at McCreadie's. That sounds like my kind of place.
Yeah, that would be cool. Definitely. So let me ask you, how does the structure work for, because I don't know, like obviously this has a cost to it. So how does an individual differ from a company training course, or like how do we differentiate between and the cost of each one?
Yep. So yeah, our primary market is companies, right? Like your heating and air, you might buy 3 seats or you might buy 50 or 125, right? Totally depends on how big your fleet is and how big your tech workforce is. And what they typically do is buy a 1-year access per person. And that access is $300 for the year. And you have everything there, all the catalog you want. There's no sort of an all-you-can-eat buffet. And inside of it, there's all kinds of features in terms of competency pass and learning pass and assessments and all that. We won't get into all that. But yeah, so it's a SaaS-based, subscription as a service, and it costs $300 for that tech that year. That's sort of retail. It goes down, as you can imagine, with some volume. And the individual tech, if we call them enterprising techs. This is the guy on your staff who's been there a year and a half and he's kind of embarrassed to ask that he actually doesn't understand what's going on with X, Y, or Z. So they often get on and buy it, and they'll often buy the monthly, which is $20 a month for that individual.
Oh, that's a really good
it's
price.
crazy cheap, right? We just want them getting in there, learning the skills. We want to be that person's learning platform for life, right? We want them to come back for, I want to cross train into plumbing, or I want to go deeper on my electrical, or whatever that is. And so, yeah, we price it really affordably, and we just want to show the world what's possible with this kind of digital training. So, yeah, that's the primary pricing. Does that make sense?
Yep. No, it does. And then what I did want to ask you, I wrote down the word certification about 5 minutes ago, because I wanted to ask you if there's any parallels to any certifications that you get by doing these courses.
Yeah, certainly. So do you guys, I apologize, because do you guys all you have your own version of NATE, I would imagine, which is the personnel certification here in the US? What's that called?
So NATE is, there are NATE certified techs and companies in Canada, because NATE is recognized across North America. And it's funny you say that, because in 2 nights I actually have Tony from NATE coming on to talk about their new training program.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
well, ask him about us, because NATE we just announced a partnership with us. So he may be talking about us in part.
that's great. The program is called geez. Now I'm going to sound
like CHP one, the new CHP.
That's right. Yeah, the -5.
That's right.
Okay. So we're going to talk about that.
So what he will tell you is, online, when you're logged in and you say, I want to learn the content for CHP, I think there's only one online partner they have, and click through here to go to Interplay Learning. And cool. We've actually mapped our courses to the CHP 5, and I think we've got about 70% coverage. We can't cover anything. You can imagine that's a massive list of, what do they call them? CATES, basically knowledge groups. And but we have a pretty heavy coverage there, and we map it out for the users when they come over. And so we get some traffic now that way, people pursuing the CHP 5.
Mm-hmm.
So we align with the certification, certainly, and we'll prep you for, we have certain prep exams like EPA 608 here in this country, NATE Ready to Work, which is that sort of just getting out of the gates. We got a prep course for that. We got a prep course for a couple other exams. So yeah, we certainly we set you up for that third-party testing, right? Because we're not the testing agency. We're just getting you prepped to go get your certifications. Or in this country, some states have licensing requirements. So same type of thing. We'll make sure the materials cover in those state exams as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we got licensing here. All the provinces do in Canada. And Nate, I've seen, I don't see it too much, but I've seen some trucks drive by me on the highway that have the Nate sticker on them. So I know it's around here, but I just don't know how involved Nate is in Canada. But I know it's heavily involved in the US. And I know every time we talk about Nate on social media, it's always very polarizing. There's always people that, hey, yeah, I got my certification, I like it, and hey, it doesn't do anything for me. And we always have these conversations.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that their new training curriculum, I think is trying to alleviate some of this polarization. Is that's that's what I get out of it anyway. So we're going to learn more about that actually in a couple of days. So,
yeah, good. I mean, they recognize. I mean, their hands are tied a little bit when you talk too much long. They're what's called an ISO 17024 organization, and so they have some real rigor around creating scheme committees and creating standards and testing to those standards. And the industry's moving fast, and it's kind of hard for them to travel at the speed sometimes of the industry because some of those restrictions. So I think it'll forever be a little bit of a battle because of that. I hope some people like us can kind of fill gaps a little bit, like when you don't have time necessarily, or you're moving faster than their opportunities on that side of things work, that maybe Interplay helps with. Like we have mini assessments, so we're certainly not Nate, but you certainly can get a little bit of a yardstick on where you stand and your understanding. So I think there's a couple ways to get this done in the long term.
Cool. So how long have you guys been working on Interplay? Like how many years you guys been working on this project?
We've been doing this. My marketing person's going to kill me, but we've been doing this for 10 years. So we started this company actually 10 years ago this week. Congratulations. I just realized that. I'm saying that to myself. I didn't even realize that. I'm looking at the
anniversary.
Thank you. I'm looking right now at the calendar and going, holy cow, you're right. It was September 10th or so, 2010. And that's where we started with that energy auditing simulation development that I started, we started the story with. Like that was the genesis of this whole thing. When we did that energy auditing sim, we did it, and I had a co-founder at the time, and we were looking around at the other trades, and we saw HVAC, because obviously that runs quickly into the HVAC world, electrical, plumbing. We were amazed that nobody was using simulation. So through the years, we've built so many training simulations in all different areas. I mean, we've gone outside of the trades too. And so we've honed an ability to move somebody in a 3D environment on a technical skill set, and we're good at it now. And I know we're good at it now because we were bad at it with a couple of those products. Some of them, it's hard to move somebody in their technical understanding, and so we built some good ones and some bad ones through the years. And then really in 2016, we recognized how big the skills gap was, how much pain was being felt by the service companies and the like. And we decided, let's go do this at scale. And to do it at scale, we're going to need a really big catalog. And to do a big catalog, we're going to need an authoring engine to do this smarter and faster. So we took a year and a half and built that authoring engine that allows us to build these simulations really rapidly. We raised some outside venture capital money, and here we go. Now that we're on a small rocket ship as of the last, it kind of took off about a year ago, but COVID really added another a little boost, if you will, because of the online delivery.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, there's a lot of companies that are in the technical realm or the tech-based realm that COVID has given them sort of a lift, because we've had to stay back from people. We've had to, you know what I mean? And any tech-based app or platform that can be utilized for training or education or helping on the actual physical job, I think has been used a lot more over the last 6 to 8 months.
Absolutely. I mean, you started, you mentioned earlier, like we need to get some of the older guys to embrace the younger guys. The conversation you said you had with my brother,
Hmm.
and embrace it. And so, the catalyst. I mean, COVID acted as a catalyst, right? If you were kind of on the fence or you were reluctant, it was sort of like, well, we're forcing it to you now because you don't have a whole lot of choices.
Yeah.
And what they found is it's gone well for them, that they found out how effective it was. They watched the younger folks really take to it quickly, and they watch skill sets improve in a hurry. And we've been doing some case studies in the last 3 or 4 months that we'll just start putting out, that they're really seeing an impact on it. So yeah, that's it's been. I mean, you don't, as a company or as a person, you don't root for a pandemic ever.
No, definitely
And
not.
but it's been interesting for our business that we've actually accelerated through it. Not something we expected at all.
Hmm. So I got one more thing to bring up, and then I'll let you mosey on and relax for the evening. So, do you have any plans to work with manufacturers to do manufacturer training in a simulation sort of based model?
We do already.
Okay,
We actually client lists include Carrier, Rheem, Rude, Daikin, Goodman, Johnson Controls, Gree. So it's the list is deep. Train, Ferguson, two others. In some of those cases, we're building, very specific training. So for Carrier, we've been working with them for a number of years, and we built probably 6 or 7 particular sims or specific sims to theirs, like the Carrier Infinity VSR heat pump, for example. So you can imagine our catalog has general heat pump training, but then there's also manufacturer-specific heat pump training that they serve into their community of learners. We don't have on our general catalog. That's agnostic. We try to remain brand agnostic there. But Rheem and Rude, we've been building sims for them for a while, and Goodman, we're just getting going this year with them, so that's been exciting. Goodman and Daikin. So yeah, they recognize to scale technical training, and especially either COVID world, but even at the pace we're going, right? They were having trouble people coming to regional trainings or taking days out of the field, right, to go to 2-day training. It's just harder and harder to do with the lean workforces. And so they're looking for alternatives. They saw us, and that's a big part of what we do now.
that is very cool. So, I mean, in lieu of actually going to a training like for Carrier, for example, because you brought up them first. So instead of going to their factory and or wherever they're holding their training, in lieu of that, you can actually do the training course through Interplay Learning, and that is considered to be the training.
That's right. You actually do it not through us, but through they have their own learning
Oh,
management
okay. I
system.
gotcha.
So
Okay.
we feed it to them, and we're sort of white labeled behind the curtain for
Gotcha.
them. But we work with their subject matter experts, right? We work with we get their, CAD files to build it, so it's actually built to spec exactly what it looks like in the real world. We build it, and we use their subject matter experts to build out that diagnostic tree, or depending on, if it's an install sim or whatever it is, they're going to help guide that. And that engine I mentioned earlier, that authoring engine, that allows for us to do that. And, our first simulation we built in 2010-11 took 13 months. 13 months and about $250,000.
Wow.
And now we build simulations in about 2.5 to 5.5 weeks, depending on the complexity. And so it's just a whole different world. And so that's appealing to manufacturers, as you can imagine, because it does allow. And, look, we're not trying to replace their regional trainings or, distribution training or trainings at distribution centers. Some of that's still going to go on. We kind of consider this as another alternative, sort of that portfolio of training opportunities. So, and they found it to be effective and, solving some challenges that geography presents or tight schedules present, that this is a pretty good option to get technical training.
Yeah, that is super cool, because I'm imagining in my head that I get a call from the dispatcher. Hey, you're gonna go work on this tomorrow. I'm like, okay, I've never worked on that before, and if I could find it on
Definitely.
a platform like a manufacturer that has worked with you guys or whatever, and I'm like, I wonder if I can go take that training with them. like before I go work on it, just to refresh, or not refresh, but get to know the system before I even work on it. That is valuable.
Absolutely.
Very
Yep.
valuable.
Yep, absolutely. And what you're not doing is logging in and reading the manual, right? This is the opposite, right? We want to really, when you log in, you should have some kind of active learning opportunity, and that's what we try to deliver.
Yeah, I always preach to read the manual, but I mean, half of those manuals they're filled with warnings everywhere, and you're like, warning, don't turn off power before you start work. Yeah. I'm like, come on, just give me the meat and potatoes of what I need to know.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't see you on Wednesday night at 9:00 jumping in and reading that manual. But you might jump in and do a sim for 40 minutes before you go to bed, and then go hit that unit, try to fix that unit the next day. So there's definitely, we do say, people have asked, like, well, what's the difference from what you're doing, or why do people do it? And there's a phrase we use that we say, this is training that techs will actually use. And we hear that a lot, because it is, it's appealing and attractive to use. It's not like, learning's hard, right? It's like going to the gym. Like you gotta want to get in there. And so if it's a lot of friction up front, or if it's like, like we said, just reading the manual front to back, you've got to have a lot of motivation to do that. Be great if everybody did, but we're trying to also engage them in other ways and motivate them in other ways. Yeah.
So where can a company, a tech, an apprentice go to find more information on this kind of stuff?
Easiest is just our website, interplaylearning.com. That's INTER, interplaylearning.com, and it's all sort of laid out for you there. You could, buy it on the spot, log in 20 seconds later, and $20 later if you're an individual, and off you go. Or if you're a service manager, you probably put your info in, and you probably get a call in 20 minutes later from one of our reps who will walk you through the platform.
Very cool. So what was I going to say there? I totally blanked on that question as I'm scribbling on this piece of paper. Oh yeah, that's right. Any social media platforms to follow, like Instagram, Facebook?
We're on them all. Yep. Instagram. I think it's Interplay Learn on Twitter. We're active, posting on LinkedIn and Facebook. We're pretty active on Facebook as well. We built a nice little community of learners. They turn to each other. They'll ask each other about some content or questions, etc. So yeah, we're easy to find in all of those places.
Perfect. Awesome. So thank you, Doug. I appreciate your time, and I learned quite a bit from you about this platform, and I want to check it out a little bit more.
Cool. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. So we talk about how the world is changing all the time as it pertains to the HVAC industry, the tools, the methods, ways we communicate online through social media and all that kind of stuff. Now, this is taking it another step. So we talked to Michael Petgrave about how they've innovated a filter on the last podcast. Now we are talking to Doug about how they've innovated training. Now you don't need to get on a plane and go to a training center for a certain manufacturer, as we've discussed. You can actually do it where you are, set it up, and it's actually recognized as the manufacturer training, which is very cool. We're sort of making the world a little bit smaller in that way. Because for me, for instance, I got a young family. If I was told I got to get on a plane for a week, 2 weeks to go do some training, that's probably not going to happen for me, because I can't be out of here, leave my wife high and dry, and go for 2 weeks and let her. Well, I could, but she wouldn't be too happy when I got back home. So anyway, this is kind of an advantage for people that are in that position, right? So anyway, guys, you got the information from Doug, how you can check it out. So go check out Interplay Learning. And if you guys are liking it, if you guys try it out, give me some feedback. I'd love to hear from you guys, how you guys are finding it, or how it's helping you, or how it's helping the technicians that are working within your company. Anyway, guys, I'm out. Happy HVACing.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Follow HVAC Know-It-All on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, and anywhere else Gary feels like popping up. This has been a Two Smokes and a Coffee production.